Don't be fooled by this shabby hat, the story begins, for beneath it lies the mind of a true businessman. Beneath that hat is a young black boy named Bernard Garrett, who shines shoes on a dusty street in Texas, 1939. On the surface, he's just another poor black child struggling to make a few coins. But behind his quiet eyes hides an ambition larger than anyone around him can imagine. Every day, Bernard deliberately sets up his small shoeshine stall outside a local bank. It's a strategic choice. His customers are mostly wealthy white businessmen, bankers, and investors. He doesn't care much about the dimes and quarters he earns. Instead, he listens. As these men talk about money, real estate, and stocks while waiting for their shoes, Bernard memorizes everything he can. When they leave, he pulls out a small notebook and writes down what he overheard. Bits of banking language, investment ideas, and business strategies. Even as a child, Bernard already knows what he wants. He dreams of one day becoming a banker himself. But in 1939 Texas, that dream is nearly impossible. The South is still steeped in racism and segregation. When Bernard confides his goal to his father, the man sighs sadly. "Son," he says, "that's not a world made for us." Yet Bernard's eyes burn with quiet defiance. From shoeshine to real estate. 15 years later, Bernard has grown into a determined young man. He leaves Texas and moves to Los Angeles with his wife, Eunice, and their child, hoping to find a place with less racial hostility. The family barely scrapes by at first, living in a cramped storage room owned by relatives. Still, Bernard promises Eunice that their struggle won't last forever. He will make something of himself. Bernard takes a job as a real estate agent, spending his days exploring neighborhoods and studying housing trends. Through sharp observation, he notices something critical. The black communities in Los Angeles are overcrowded, while nearby white neighborhoods have vacant homes. Black families are willing to pay good rent, but are systematically excluded from white areas. Bernard recognizes this imbalance as an enormous opportunity. One day he spots a rundown, white-owned apartment building, overgrown with weeds but ideally located near the black district. Seeing potential where others see decay, he approaches the white owner and makes an offer. Bernard promises $30,000 up front and another $5,000 once all the units are rented. The owner is intrigued but hesitant. Dealing with a black buyer is risky, and lending to one is almost unheard of. Bernard doesn't give up. While talking to the owner, he notices a calendar from a local bank hanging on the wall. An idea sparks in his mind. He heads straight to that bank, hoping to meet the manager and secure a loan. But the manager's secretary, steeped in prejudice, refuses to let him through. So Bernard waits for hours until the manager leaves for the day. When the man finally appears, Bernard steps forward confidently and pitches his plan, explaining that his project would benefit one of the bank's VIP clients. The manager brushes him off instantly. That night, Bernard receives a call from the property owner, who has heard about the loan attempt and asks whether Bernard used his name. Bernard admits it and apologizes. To his surprise, the owner doesn't scold him. Instead, he praises Bernard's courage and ambition and decides to personally guarantee the loan. For the first time, Bernard secures bank financing and buys the building, breaking barriers in real estate. Not long after, Bernard faces his first brush with open racism in his new role as landlord. An elderly white tenant confronts him, assuming he's just a maintenance worker. When Bernard calmly informs her that he's actually the owner, she's speechless and furious. Within days, she moves out rather than live under a black landlord. Bernard wastes no time and rents her apartment to a black tenant. Soon, every unit is filled, just as he predicted. When the property becomes profitable, Bernard pays the remaining $5,000 he owes the original owner. Impressed, the man proposes a business partnership. Bernard will scout and manage properties, while the white partner, acting as the public face, handles negotiations and paperwork. Together, they can buy more buildings without racial interference. Bernard agrees, and the two men make a fortune. Their success allows Bernard to move his family into a luxurious new home. For a while, everything seems perfect. Bernard thrives not through anger or confrontation, but through strategy and intellect. When faced with discrimination, he refuses to react emotionally. He'd rather outsmart the system than fight it head-on. His ultimate goal isn't revenge, but economic power. However, tragedy soon strikes. Bernard's white partner dies unexpectedly, leaving his share of the business to his widow, a bitterly racist woman. She immediately demands that Bernard sell his stake for a fraction of its value, or face a lawsuit. In that era, a black man standing before a white judge had little chance of winning. Still, Bernard decides to fight back in court. He searches for witnesses to prove his legitimate partnership, but his potential ally, the bank manager, has already sided with the widow. Disillusioned, Bernard realizes the entire financial system is rigged against men like him. Yet instead of breaking his spirit, the experience fuels a new, audacious idea: owning the banks themselves. In the building where his trial took place, there are 4 banks, all of which had once refused to lend him money. Looking up at their shiny facades, Bernard makes a silent vow. If they won't let me in, I'll buy the building they stand in. Before that meeting, Bernard meticulously gathers data, occupancy rates, revenue figures, maintenance costs, and feeds Matt every number he'll need. When the owner tries to bluff, Matt counters each claim with precise figures, stunning the man and his accountant. Convinced he's dealing with a prodigy, the owner agrees to sell the building for $1.56 million, far below the asking price of $2.4 million. Now, the same banks that once turned Bernard away must greet him with smiles and handshakes. The discriminatory manager who once mocked him can only stare in disbelief. With access to capital and inside information, Bernard and Joe's real estate empire expands rapidly. They shatter Los Angeles's racial housing barriers, helping many black families move into neighborhoods once reserved for whites. Their success even catches the attention of the U.S. Vice President, returning home and facing new battles. By 1963, Bernard has achieved enormous wealth and respect. He takes his family back to Texas to visit his aging father. Over dinner, his father expresses deep pride in his son's accomplishments. The next day, Bernard strolls through his old town with his young son. They stop in front of the same bank where Bernard once shined shoes. There they meet a young black shoeshine boy who refuses to serve black customers, just as the white patrons once refused Bernard. That moment hits Bernard hard. He realizes that personal success isn't enough if his community still suffers. Determined to make a difference, he decides to help black families in Texas gain access to fair housing and loans. He contacts Joe again with another daring idea: buying a bank in Texas, the very heart of America's racism. Joe initially dismisses it as suicide, but Bernard's conviction wins him over. Together with Matt as their white intermediary, they negotiate with Robert Florence Sr. and Jr. Despite Florence Jr.'s suspicions, the deal goes through, and the trio becomes the secret owners of a Texas bank. At first, everything goes well. Bernard uses his position to approve fair loans for black families, allowing them to buy homes and improve their lives. But Florence Jr., furious over losing control, begins digging into the bank's operations. He discovers their scheme and plots revenge. Soon he confronts Matt, waving a letter from the U.S. Treasury Department announcing an impending inspection. Matt, panicked, suggests they buy another bank to shift the problem loans there. Bernard reluctantly agrees, and they purchase the Bank of Marlin, with Matt insisting on managing it himself. Unfortunately, Matt's inexperience and Florence's sabotage lead to disaster. During the audit, federal examiners uncover fraudulent loans, documents secretly planted through a lawyer Florence had recommended. The government revokes Mainland's license, and both Bernard and Joe are arrested. Matt, desperate and afraid, cuts a deal. Persuaded by a corrupt senator, he testifies against Bernard and Joe in exchange for immunity. During the Senate hearing, Bernard is offered the same bargain: confess and go free, or stand by his principles and face prison. He chooses to speak the truth instead, denouncing America's racial injustice before Congress. Legacy and redemption. Bernard and Joe are sentenced to federal prison, their fortunes stripped away. Florence Jr. buys back the bank for a fraction of its worth. Years later, when Bernard and Joe are released, Eunice is surprised to find them smiling despite losing everything. Then Joe reveals their secret. Before the government could seize their assets, Matt, racked with guilt, had called Bernard and helped him hide some properties offshore. As a result, the two men still own neighboring mansions in the Bahamas, a quiet testament to their resilience and brilliance. Their earlier work breaking housing segregation in Los Angeles lives on, opening doors for generations of Black homeowners to come. Bernard Garrett's journey, from a shoeshine boy eavesdropping outside a Texas bank to a man who bought the buildings those banks stood in, is a story of intelligence, perseverance, and the unyielding pursuit of equality through economic power.